When I was in high school, I had a very special living situation. I won't go into the details of how it worked, but I lived above an office, a business office. When I got home from school, I'd go into the office to collect the mail. Well, one day I'd forgotten my key. I had to wait in the office for my mother to come home so we could go inside. They said it was fine, and I ended up just hanging out for a few hours. Towards the end of the evening, when the worker was getting ready to leave, a man came in. He was asking about the products and chatting with the worker, and then he turned to me. I was younger at the time, so I thought nothing of this. I also feel I should mention that the worker is also male, but a trusted person, and someone I felt comfortable being around. The customer kept trying to talk to me, and the worker, we'll call him Sam, kept redirecting the customer. I'll refer to the customer as Tom, to him. Tom was asking me questions to me, that seemed innocent. Where do you go to school? How old are you? Do you have any siblings? Just generic things. So I answered, I go to Hill High School. I'm 14. I'm an only child. Sam chimed in and asked him if he was going to purchase anything. Tom gave him a half-assed answer and went back to me. Do you have parents you live with? Yes, I live with my mum. Now, Sam got a little weird at this point. He gave me a shut up look and turned to Tom. I just stopped talking, but I didn't fully understand why I needed to. For me, this was just small talk to a random guy. Eventually, Sam got Tom to leave. Once he had locked the doors, he told me never to talk to someone like that again, as it was very dangerous. He said I should never say where I lived. I had mentioned loosely that I lived here, or who I am living with. He told me he would wait outside until my mum got home and talk to her. Well, she came home, opened the door, and I went inside while they had their adult talk. As I said before, it was just my mother and I. No father, no siblings. This is important for later. My mother came upstairs, and told me to be careful, to always check with who was working downstairs, and to not say anything about our living situation to anyone else. I understood and went to bed. The next day I was walking home from school and I had come into the office. I wanted to check if I had any mail and just wanted to say hello to the girl who was working, Maria. She greeted me kindly and handed me my mail. I really liked Maria. She was always sweet and gave me gifts, small crafts she would make for fun. I had turned to leave when she told me she'd forgotten to tell me something. She smiled and said, "Oh, before I forget, your dad stopped by today. He was asking to get upstairs." And she stopped, waiting for my reply. I stopped dead in my tracks. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears and I felt like I couldn't breathe. I turned back immediately and said, "I don't have a dad." She laughed and went, "Silly, yes you do. He's tall, dark hair, white, you know." I realised the man from the night before fit that description, and then it hit me how creepy he was. Why would he keep attention on a young girl in a small retail store? Why did he want to know all of those things about me? Where is he now? I looked at Maria and asked if she'd let him into our space upstairs. They had a copy of the key for emergencies. She told him that I wasn't home yet, but he could go up if he wanted to. She did say she didn't give him the key, as she would have thought he'd had his own. I called my mum crying, and she came home to comfort me. We called the police and filed an official complaint, and needless to say, I stopped talking to strangers after that, and I never forgot my key again. This may not sound like much, but to me, this is still one of the most terrifying things that has happened to me. What if he had gotten in? What if he'd had taken me? Who or where would I be now if I was even still alive? Things could have been really bad really fast. I'm just lucky and so thankful for Sam for being there when I needed him, and I'm glad that Maria had enough sense to not open our door. First, some backstory. I live in a small town in the south of Bulgaria. Almost nothing actually happens here. The most interesting things that happen here are the big fair at the beginning of autumn, the winemaking competition, and the celebrations in May. Our town is built between two rivers, and the winters are cold and foggy and very rainy. We don't really see much snow though, it's quite rare to see snow. At the end of November, the whole town was shocked by a terrible murder. At one of the rivers, 2 bodies were found. The terrifying thing is that the bodies were of children, and their internal organs were missing. The livers, kidneys, lungs, an ugly scene for sure. The whole town started gossiping. All the people said that they think this is the work of the organ traffickers. They were told of an unknown white van that was seen around the streets. They said that the license plate of the van was from the region R, which is typically known as Russia, especially in Eastern Europe. People who had witnessed the van also said that the windows were tinted darker than usual. Us kids was absolutely terrified at first, but after some time we even started joking about it. We called the van the White Ambulance, and we used to say, "The White Ambulance will catch you," or "Beware of the White Ambulance." But this case had us stop joking about it. So it was just around the same time of year that when our winter break had just started, so you can imagine our joy when at the first day of break we woke up to a heavy snowstorm. The snow didn't stop for 2 days. When it finally stopped, we went to a nearby forest to slide down one of the hills with 2 of my friends. That afternoon we had been invited to a birthday party from one of our classmates. We were really happy and cheerful, as we expected our classmates were too. The birthday was in a restaurant at the centre of town near the park. The birthday was awesome. We ate a lot of cake and chicken nuggets, had a big snowball fight, and built a snowman. When it reached around 5 o'clock in the afternoon, it was pitch dark, but we still decided to stay out and play in the snow. When it got to about 6 o'clock, our parents started calling us back home because it was really late and it was below 0 degrees Celsius. Me and my 2 friends, the same 2 that I had been playing with all morning, decided to head home together because we all lived in the same neighbourhood. It was around a 10-minute walk, and we didn't want to go home quite yet, so we just dawdled and played in the snow, joking and walking slowly. When we were halfway to our neighbourhood, we heard an engine sound behind us. It was a white van. Our streets have almost no street lamps, and the few that we did have only shined an orange, dull hue. The van stood at one of the dark spots of the street, and we continued on our way when we heard it again, and then we could see it again. It was a white van with dark windows. We were so shocked and scared. We couldn't believe it. This couldn't be the real van that everyone had been talking about. We started walking a little bit faster, and then the van positioned himself only a few meters from us. We were absolutely terrified. Only a few moments later, we were running like the wind, using all of our strength, whirling ourselves forward. Our houses were so close, we managed to just make it there. When I got home, I locked the door and called my friends to be sure that they were okay, and looked out of the balcony. Then I saw the van passing our house. I looked really carefully, and I could see it. I will never forget it. I was 10 back then. Now I'm 18 years old, and I still remember the little R on the license plate. My family, mother, older brother and older sister, and I moved into our new home. At first, everything seemed great, and we were enjoying the new house and meeting the neighbours. But after a few weeks, I started noticing strange things happening. My mother raised us single-handedly, which meant my older sister had to babysit my brother and I when my mother would go out to work. At this time, my sister and I shared a bedroom. My brother would occasionally sleep in our room if he had a bad dream and didn't want to stay in his room by himself. One night, my sister was babysitting and had sent me and my brother to bed around 8 o'clock, but I couldn't fall asleep because I could hear my sister walking around downstairs whilst I was in bed. Not long after I was sent to bed, I could hear strange like heavy breathing. I looked around my dark room, but I couldn't see anyone. My sister hadn't come out to bed yet, and my brother wasn't in the room either. I hid under the covers, held my breath, and tried to listen to the sound again. This time, I could hear the breathing again, but it felt like it was closer. I was so scared, and I was getting really hot under the covers. I decided to try and run out of my room as quickly as I could. I threw my covers off of me really quickly, and I ran downstairs and I told my sister what had happened. She came upstairs with me and checked the room and under the beds, but we didn't find anything. She decided to go to bed too, so I ended up falling asleep that night a little better, knowing my sister was in the room. This was my first experience. Dear LukjanovArt, I wish to remain anonymous. Here's a true story. There are many other paranormal experiences we had before moving to this particular home, but this was the most disturbing one for me. A few years ago, I moved into an older house in a decent neighbourhood with my 2 teenagers. We've all had experiences with paranormal activity in our previous homes, but we had hoped that this was all behind us. Our home is a 4-level split with a TV room in the basement. The TV room had a bit of a dark feeling to it, but we kind of thought that it was due to there being no windows. After about a year of settling in, my teenagers mentioned they are seeing ghosts. This wasn't a new phenomenon to us. We sometimes see shadows and dark figures in other people's homes, and I had seen them too, but I wasn't alarmed. We had just figured we had a bit of an extrasensory perception of things compared to other people. As the months drew on, the kids would hear sounds coming from the kitchen when there was no one there. No one was freaked out, as this had happened in our last home, and we would talk about it, and I would frequently smudge the house, and things would settle down for a bit. Over time, things would just go missing, like a pair of prescription glasses, or pens, or makeup, or less important items. Things seemed to go missing at night time. There were several times my teenagers would text me while I was out of the house, asking if I was home because they heard my voice or heard someone moving through the house. I experienced it a few times too, but I wouldn't text them. I'd just ask them the next day or whenever if they were home because I could hear them chatting or could hear the TV on. Each time, no other person was in the house. Then, after returning from a work trip across the country, I woke up the next day to retrieve a USB from my small purse. This USB contained important and highly confidential material, which I wasn't aware of until after I'd returned home. So I searched the small purse with only one zippered pocket inside to no avail. I searched everything, all my bags and my clothes, several times over a couple of days. Nothing. A few days later, I checked the small purse again, and there it was, the USB. I was freaked out a bit, but I let it pass. Surely I must have just missed it, but how? I don't know. A month or so later, I woke up to find a series of reddish stains on the wall in my dining room. Upon closer inspection, it appeared to be red wine, like someone had spilled wine that went from the ceiling down to the baseboards, but there were no stains on the floor. It appeared as though the point of contact went from the landing and then went up. I asked my teenagers about it, wondering if I'd spilled wine somehow but forgot, or if they had. They weren't really much for drinking, let alone red wine, and they did know that I wouldn't have been mad if, in fact, it had been them, because they were 18 by then anyway. I felt a bit pissed off thinking that something in the house had gone beyond playing games with us to trying to scare us. I have pictures of this on my old phone, I think. After doing some light reading into removing spirits from the home, I carried around a white candle in a glass holder and was speaking out loud to the spirit, if there was one, and finally demanded that they leave our home, or something like that. The glass holder that I was carrying shattered and the candle went out. I stopped talking and just threw the stuff out. Nothing much happened over the next little while. I went to the basement one day and looked around. The door to the TV room was closed. It had been filled with bedroom furniture, no couch. Somehow, behind the door, I saw a small boy lying face down on a sofa on the other side. I sensed that he felt sad and afraid. It occurred to me that if there were paranormal activity in my home, it might be from this lost boy. I talked to my teen about it, and we kind of agreed that this might be part of someone else's spirit who has not left here or something like that. Since then, we have still had paranormal experiences, but we've agreed to never speak about them in the house. We text or talk in the car. I think that if we feel fear or talk out loud about these things, it gives them energy. Anyhow, following this rule, things have been pretty good for a long time. All that being said, I want to mention 4 experiences which I think are somewhat unusual, which have happened in as many years, and it involves birds. First experience was me responding to my dog rummaging around my front closet, which was unusual. I went to see what was happening, and a little bird was hiding behind some shoes. They were released after a few unsettling moments. Another time was about a year ago, when I awoke to some rummaging type sounds in my bedroom, No one was home and the dog had since passed. And I awoke to find a similar little bird trying to get out from my bedroom window. They were safely released. Not alarming really, but about 6 months later, I awoke to the sound at my bedroom window and I see a little bird flying into my window for about 5 minutes before it went elsewhere. The freakiest thing, and I have a picture of this, is of a similar little bird caught in between two window panes in my kid's room. This is an old house with old windows, so it might be difficult to imagine this scenario. The old windows slide from left to right. The inside window was partially open and the outside window was completely closed. The little bird was dead and trapped between the two panes. The only way it could have been possible for it to be trapped there is if it came inside the house and tried going out that way. The fact that it had managed to, in a flattened state, move half an inch between the two panes is weird. My mom and I were shopping in Walmart and getting some new things. We had no real agenda. We were just wandering around until something caught our eye. I was in the shoe department looking at some really cool boots I'd found. The shoe section for this store was in between the men's clothing and the women's clothing, with the dressing rooms to one side. Where I was, there was a very clear view of the men's section. I had glanced over and noticed two guys staring at me. They were definitely a lot older than I was, maybe mid-20s or so. I was still a teenager in high school. I turned and walked to the other aisle, where I found my mum. I grabbed her and I told her I wanted to leave this section. We walked away and I figured that was the end of it. I had removed myself from the situation and found safety in numbers. Nothing really had happened, so I didn't think that it was worth mentioning or leaving for. We went to the electronics and there they were again, weaving in and out of the aisles that we were in, keeping eyes locked on me. Again, I grabbed my mum and we were off. We went to the kitchen and the bedding. They were peeking behind some pillows. This kept up for a good 20 minutes or so before I finally told a worker. I kept it short and sweet. There's two creepy guys who keep following and looking at me. Please be aware. I got a lazy, okay, and then I went back on my way. Well, as we're making our way through the store, they're getting progressively closer to me. Their faces becoming more detailed and their actions more deliberate. At one point, one of them walked loosely behind me. I stopped at a table and the other man came on to the other side of the table, now face to face with me. I remember so vividly the fear I had. I was looking this man dead in the eyes. I didn't move, didn't speak. He looked at me, raised his eyebrows and stuck his tongue out. I don't mean in an annoying kid way, I mean seductively, like he was imagining me while doing it. All the while he kept eye contact with me. I wanted to cry, and my mum was in the next aisle over. He had started to reach towards me slowly, and I bolted. I ran as fast as I could to her, begged and pleaded with her to leave as I was trying not to cry, and she took me and left. We went to the front and complained again, just to be told there was nothing they could do, since he didn't speak to or physically interact with me. Never mind the fact these two creeps followed me for the better part of an hour around this entire Walmart, or how they cornered me or scared me. I felt like I was being hunted, stalked in this store. They didn't let up, not one bit. And all we could do was pay for our items and leave. My mum almost went and yelled at them, but I told her not to, as I was worried that this would provoke them further. The most frustrating part is that they got away with it. What if they've done this to other girls? What if they'd actually hurt or taken or assaulted someone before? And I was supposed to be next? Walmart, if you ever hear this, fuck you. You did nothing to protect or prevent against situations like this. Hi guys, thanks for listening. If you have your own story to submit to me, find me on reddit.com/r/LukjanovArt. Please don't forget to hit that subscribe button, tickle that bell icon, and leave a like or a comment should you wish to do so, and I hopefully will see you all in the next video. And thank you so much for putting up with me and my very, very sore throat. I hope nobody really noticed it that much.